So here I've got the Sony Xperia Z Ultra, and this was Sony's answer to Samsung's Galaxy Note back in the year 2013. So that makes this phone 11 years old at the time of filming this video. Man, 2013 feels like it was yesterday, right? Anyways, what I'm about to do is swap my new Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra with the almost 11 years old Sony Xperia Z Ultra for about a week and see how it goes. My aim is to assess how usable a 10-year-old Android smartphone really is. And I thought the Z Ultra with its gigantic 6.4-inch Full HD LCD screen along with the ultra-thin profile is the perfect candidate. You don't really get to see thin smartphones like these anymore. Oh, and did I mention this thing is also water resistant? And back in my early days of YouTube, I did a test where I fully submerged this exact Z Ultra in water and it survived no problem and it is still alive today. However, the water resistance is long gone because the gasket around the USB port cover has long disintegrated. And speaking of USB, this thing uses micro USB. And I've got plenty of micro USB cables lying around. Anywho, the first thing we have to do is take the SIM card out from the S24 Ultra and pop it into the Z Ultra. And credit to Sony, I really like this design. No need for any SIM ejection pins. You can remove or insert your SIM and the micro SD card with your fingers. And this should be easy, right? Well, that's where I encountered the first issue. You see, the S24 Ultra uses a nano SIM. Meanwhile, the Z Ultra uses micro SIM, which is slightly larger in size. And this should not be an issue because you can buy an adapter off Amazon. So with the SIM card situation sorted out, let's pop the SIM card into the phone with the adapter. And I'm also gonna pop in a 128GB micro SD card because this thing only has 16GB of internal memory. So now that the SIM card is inside the phone, we can take it off flight mode so that it can register with the network. And within seconds, the phone was connected to my Wi-Fi network and also registered itself onto the network. So we should be able to make and receive phone calls. Now, with an old phone like this, the first thing you want to do is open the Play Store and update all the apps. And it looks like the phone has automatically signed out of my Google account. I think I last powered this phone on in 2019, so this was bound to happen. And signing back into my Google account was not an issue. So now we can go ahead and update all the apps. And there are quite a few apps to update, so we will let the phone do its thing. And you know what? I forgot how hot these old Snapdragons used to get. We are only updating apps and the surface temperature is already up to 45 degrees. And we're in a room that's about 28 degrees Celsius. So yeah, it does get nice and toasty. And speaking of the hardware, the Sony Xperia Z Ultra is rocking a quad-core Snapdragon 800 along with 2GB of RAM, which was top-of-the-line flagship material in 2013, and it really shows in the benchmarks. This phone smoked every other competitor in the market, and you can go and check out these benchmark scores on GSM Arena. And speaking of the software, this phone originally came with Android 4.2 Jellybean, which was later updated to KitKat and finally to Android 5.1 Lollipop. And surprisingly, Android 5.1 is still getting the Google Play Services updates to this day, which is awesome. So now that all the apps have been updated, I want to install a couple of essential apps that I currently use on the S24 Ultra. Starting with WhatsApp, because this is the app that I use to send and receive messages. Surprisingly, this is still supported on Android 5.1. Next up is Google Pay, and this is the app that I use to pay all my bills and also make payments for groceries. So this app is essential. Thing is, most of the common apps that you currently use should also be available on Android 5.1. Heck, even Snapchat is still available for Android 5.1. However, with such an old version of Android, there are a few exceptions, like the Amazon Shopping app along with Amazon Music isn't available. Strange enough, you've still got Amazon Prime Video. However, you can still use Amazon through the web browser, so that's kinda okay. And as for music, you've got other music streaming services like YouTube Music, Spotify, and of course an offline music player, which is awesome because this is a Sony smartphone. And these generation of smartphones have a headphone jack, so you can plug in your favorite headphones and enjoy music. Awesome, right? And check this out, it even had a built-in visualizer, which is amazing. Gotta say, this phone was ahead of its time. Oh, and did I mention the notification LED? It's actually an RGB notification LED, so you can customize its color depending on which app sends you a notification. Unfortunately, these features like the headphone jack, the SD card slot, and the notification LED have totally disappeared from modern day smartphones. Now you've got the always on display for notifications and Bluetooth audio receivers with a dedicated headphone jack. Now call me crazy, but there is quite a bit of nostalgia while using a decade-old Sony Xperia. This thing has Sony's custom skin on top of Android, which is quite lightweight, and back in the day this used to be a great lag-free experience. And along with the unique, typical Sony design, which they called Omnibalance, is what made Sony Xperia smartphones really awesome. Now, although the Snapdragon 800 might have been the fastest in 2013, it's certainly starting to show its age while trying to run the latest apps 11 years later. So that means the new apps that you are gonna download from the Play Store are gonna struggle to run on such an old hardware. But surprisingly, the phone is still capable of running modern text messaging application like WhatsApp, and it still chugs along. Oh, and this is the same keyboard we've got on the S24 Ultra, which is SwiftKey from Microsoft. So this makes the typing experience identical to what you would get with a modern day smartphone. However, the lack of apps is a major issue. Number 1, I could not find my banking application. Number 2, the Xiaomi Home app is unsupported, which I kinda need to control smart devices. And number 3, the native YouTube app does not work. And there is no update available for the YouTube app on Android Lollipop. However, you can still browse YouTube through the web browser, which is not an ideal experience. It's kinda laggy, but once you start playing a video, it works just fine. It even plays videos in 1080p, which is the native resolution of the Z Ultra's screen. So I guess that's okay. But yeah, Lollipop is showing its age. Also, what I've noticed is that even though Android Lollipop is a decade old, there are a lot of things that are similar to the latest version of Android. Google's material design language has evolved a lot over the years, but looking at Android Lollipop, you can tell it looks and feels a lot like modern day Android. Although this Android skin is quite dated, I still feel that the classic Xperia UI is awesome, especially the camera UI. And I absolutely loved the Sony camera UI back in the day. In my opinion, I think it was ahead of its time. And check this out, they had these downloadable modules which would unlock additional features. However, the service has been long shut down, so I can't really demonstrate them. Also, in the manual mode, you'll be shocked to see the number of scene modes. It's got virtually everything that you can imagine, from night mode to backlight correction HDR mode. And this used to make me feel like I'm using a Sony CyberShot digital camera. The picture quality is good for 2013 standards. Photos taken in bright light are really nice, but the photos taken in low light had a lot of noise. Thing is, even in 2013, this wasn't the best camera phone available. That title would go to the Galaxy S4 and the Xperia Z. And this is how the videos turn out to be like. It records them in 1080p 30 fps. So yeah, the camera might not be a strong point of this phone because it's more of a media consumption device. And speaking of media consumption, boy oh boy, that gigantic 6.4-inch 16:9 aspect ratio Full HD Triluminos display. It's absolutely stunning considering it's an LCD display. And on top of that, this phone came with Sony's proprietary X Reality engine, which really made the colors in the videos pop. Now obviously 6.4 inches is small by today's standard. I mean, the S24 Ultra has a bigger 6.8 inch screen, and that too in a smaller form factor thanks to the modern bezel-less design. That goes to show you how smartphone design has evolved over the years. And no, I'm not gonna complain about the bezels because this was 2013 and this is how smartphones used to look like. And back in the day, this was probably the biggest smartphone available. So this form factor puts the Z Ultra between a smartphone and a tablet. Hence, everyone used to call it a phablet. Comparing the size of the Z Ultra with a phone from a similar time period really shows you how gigantic the Z Ultra really is. If you are wondering, this is the 4.7-inch Nokia Lumia 730. This runs Microsoft Windows 10 Mobile. Oh, and does anyone remember live wallpapers? Yeah, these used to be a thing back in the day, and my favorite was the water live wallpaper, which is there on early versions of Android. So the Xperia Arc from 2011 has got this. And this is how smartphones used to look like back in the day. Look how tiny this phone is compared to modern day smartphones like the S24 Ultra. Forget S24 Ultra, this thing is even smaller than the Z Flip 5. And you know what? If this video becomes popular, I will make a video on the Xperia Arc as well as the Nokia Lumia 730. So make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Another feature that has disappeared, or at least it's not there on Samsung smartphones, is the ability to add multiple users to your smartphone. And along with this, there is also a dedicated guest mode. So the thing is, each user including the guest mode have their own personal space on the phone for their apps, settings and the home screen. So this is gonna be very useful if a guest or someone in your family wants to use your smartphone temporarily. And when they are done, you can switch back to your own user account. So this feature is awesome. I wish we had this feature on Samsung. Also, Sony's custom Android skin had something called small apps that you can access by pressing on the recents button, and these open in a window and you can use them on top of main apps. And this provides you additional functionality without closing the main app that you are using. Something very similar to Samsung's multi-window, but this is quite limited in functionality. And you can download more of these from the Play Store, and surprisingly, it looks like there are a few new ones available. So glad to see that people are still actively developing these. Now personally, I faced two major issues while using such an old smartphone. The first one is the lack of Android Auto, both wired and wireless. So you can see even though the phone is connected to the car's head unit, Android Auto does not work. This is because Android Auto requires at least Android 6.0, which is Android Marshmallow, while the Xperia is on Android 5.1.1. So Android Auto is not gonna work through this phone, it's just too old. But if you have a modern smartphone, then Android Auto works wirelessly, allowing you to use Google Maps and turn-by-turn navigation on your car stereo, which is awesome. And also, this is the video quality of the Xperia. Now, the second issue is actually quite a crucial one. So while browsing the internet, I noticed that the web pages were loading quite slowly. And by slow, I mean painfully slow. And watching YouTube over mobile data was practically impossible. And then I noticed that the phone was connected to the Edge network, which is shown by the E icon in the network signal strength bar. So that means the phone was connected to the slow 2G network rather than the faster 3G. It took over 45 seconds just to load the YouTube homepage. So to fix this, I opened up the settings, then went into the mobile network settings and forced the phone to connect to a WCDMA network, which is 3G. And to my surprise, the phone was not able to log on onto any network. We were getting absolutely no service. I even restarted the phone thinking that something might be wrong. But here's the catch. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the phone. The problem is with my mobile service provider. You see, the thing is, my mobile service provider, also known as the carrier, is Airtel, and they've shut down their 3G services and moved completely to 4 and 5G. And this happened in the year 2020, so it's been a while since they've discontinued their 3G services. But they've also left their 2G network enabled so that non-smartphone people can still use their feature phones. Now, you might say that the Z Ultra supports 4G LTE. Well, that is true, but the one that I've got does not. The model that was sold in my country is C6802, which is HSPA Plus compliant. Meanwhile, the C6806 and the C6833 are the 4G LTE models. So yeah, there you go. Because of this, browsing the web over mobile data is not a great experience. And it looks like the same is happening in Australia. So the bottom line is, depending on your carrier and their policies, this might be something that you face when you try and use a phone which is over a decade old. However, you can still send and receive normal text messages and also make and receive phone calls. Another issue that you might face while trying to use a phone which is over a decade old is its battery life. Thing is, as these lithium batteries age and go through their normal charge and discharge cycles, they will eventually lose their ability to hold charge. Now, my Z Ultra still has its original battery, and I was able to get a fairly decent screen on time of about 3 hours, and we've still got about 35% charge remaining. And the battery is still perfectly fine, there is no sign of any bulging. So that shows you Sony used a pretty high quality battery in this phone. But yeah, the battery longevity depends on your charging habits and keeping it away from high temperatures. So your mileage with a decade-old smartphone may vary. Oh, and the screen of the Z Ultra supports pencil input. So the thing is, you can use a normal pencil as a stylus and write something or draw anything you like. Now, of course, it does not have the more advanced features like palm rejection or pressure sensitivity, but yeah, if you wanted, you could use a standard pencil as a stylus. Fascinating. So, is an Android phone which is over a decade old still usable in 2024? Well, yeah, it kinda is. That is if you are willing to look over the shortcomings that I've talked about. But it's still able to do most of the things that you would want from an Android smartphone. And that is quite impressive. Now it might be fun and nostalgic to use an old Android smartphone that you might have lying around, but in reality it's a bad idea. You see, the thing is, apart from the missing apps and the modern day features, using an outdated version of Android is a big security risk because of the lack of security patches. So your phone is gonna be vulnerable to malware, exploits, and you also might run into other security related issues. So you should never sign in into your Google, Facebook, or any accounts on such an old smartphone. And banking transactions are a big no-no. If you do, well then you're asking for trouble. And not to mention the phone itself is quite sluggish while trying to run the latest apps. So if you want an inexpensive Android flagship with legacy features, grab yourself a phone which runs a more recent version of Android, like the Galaxy S10 Plus from 2019. These are fairly cheap and you get virtually everything from an SD card slot to a headphone jack. However, you can still continue using an old Android like this. My recommendation would be to disconnect this phone from the internet and use it as an offline device for watching videos, taking photos, and listening to offline music. And hey, it's still a great device for sending and receiving text messages and also for making phone calls. So I hope the video was fun to watch. If it was, make sure to hit the like button, share the video with your family and friends, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. This is Tech Guy Charlie, signing out.